Ryan, please don't leave me like this. I was curled on the kitchen floor with one arm wrapped around my stomach, fighting pain so sharp it felt like something inside me was tearing open. Sweat ran down my neck. My phone lay inches from my fingertips, but even reaching for it made my vision blur. Ryan stood near the front door with one hand on his suitcase. He looked at me, then checked his watch. My trip is already paid for, Emily. I can't stand up. Then call a taxi. The words landed harder than the pain. I stared at the man I had cared for through 2 surgeries, weeks of physical therapy, and every fever he had ever treated like an emergency. Now I was shaking on the floor, and he was annoyed that I might delay his weekend. Please, I whispered. Something is wrong. Ryan pulled the door open. You always think something is wrong. Then he walked out. The door slammed and seconds later, I heard his car pull away. For a few terrifying moments, I couldn't move. My breathing came in short, broken gasps. The room tilted around me as I dragged my hand toward the phone. Ryan had told me to call a taxi. Instead, I pressed my brother's name. Daniel answered on the second ring. Emily, I tried to speak, but only a weak sound came out. His voice changed immediately. Where are you? Kitchen, I managed. Ryan left. What do you mean he left? The line went quiet for half a second, and then I heard movement, keys, a door slamming. I'm coming. Stay awake. By the time Daniel reached the house, I was drifting in and out of consciousness. He found me beside the kitchen island, lifted me carefully, and called an ambulance while demanding to know where Ryan had gone. I couldn't answer. At the hospital, doctors rushed me into emergency surgery. My appendix was close to rupturing completely. Another delay could have killed me. Ryan ignored every call. While surgeons fought to save my life, he was checking into a hotel with the woman he had told everyone was only a colleague. But Daniel wasn't only worried about where Ryan had gone. Before leaving the house, he noticed the security monitor beside the hallway wall had been switched off. Then he saw something on the kitchen counter that made him stop cold. He stared at it and whispered. Ryan knew exactly how sick she was. The first thing I remember after surgery was the steady beeping of a heart monitor. My eyelids felt impossibly heavy, and every breath reminded me that my body had just endured something traumatic. When I finally forced my eyes open, Daniel was sitting beside my hospital bed. His elbows rested on his knees, and there was an untouched cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. The moment he saw I was awake, relief washed across his face. There you are, he said quietly. I tried to smile. My head hurts. The anesthesia will wear off. I swallowed painfully. How bad was it? Daniel hesitated before answering. The surgeon said, another hour or 2 and we might be having a very different conversation. I closed my eyes again. For the first time since the pain had started, I realized how close I had come to dying. Daniel reached over and gently squeezed my hand. You don't have to talk yet. But one question escaped before I could stop it. Has Ryan called? Daniel's jaw tightened. No, he doesn't know. Oh, he knows. I slowly turned toward him. The hospital has called him 4 times. My chest sank. He ignored them. Daniel nodded once. He ignored every single one. Silence settled between us. I wanted to defend Ryan. I wanted to tell myself there had to be a misunderstanding. Maybe his phone battery had died. Maybe he was driving. Maybe. But deep down, I already knew none of those excuses were true. Ryan had looked directly at me while I begged him not to leave. He had made a choice. The following morning, my surgeon stopped by during rounds. Emily, she said, reviewing my chart. Your appendix was severely inflamed and very close to rupturing. You were extremely fortunate your brother got you here when he did. I nodded weakly. If he'd waited, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. After she left, Daniel stood by the hospital window with his arms folded. You know, he said quietly, this wasn't an accident. I frowned. What do you mean? I mean Ryan didn't just make one bad decision yesterday. I looked away. Please don't. I'm serious. He panicked. No, he can be insensitive sometimes. Daniel turned toward me. Emily, you were lying on the kitchen floor begging for help. I couldn't answer. He didn't panic. He abandoned you. The room became painfully quiet. I stared at the blanket covering my legs. Part of me wanted to argue. Instead, memories began surfacing one after another. The winter, I caught pneumonia. Ryan complained that my coughing kept him awake. The migraine that left me vomiting for an entire weekend. He told me I was being dramatic. The sprained ankle that forced me onto crutches. He still expected me to grocery shop because he had an important meeting. Each memory had seemed small on its own. Together, they painted a picture I had spent years refusing to see. Daniel noticed the expression on my face. This isn't the first time he's convinced you that your pain doesn't matter. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I always thought if I were more patient, you shouldn't have needed patience. You needed a husband. Later that afternoon, my parents arrived at the hospital. My mother rushed over and hugged me carefully. "Oh, sweetheart." My father looked shaken. "We heard what happened." Before I could answer, my mother frowned. "Ryan said it wasn't that serious." I blinked. "What?" "He told us you had stomach cramps." Daniel slowly stood from his chair. "He actually said that?" My father nodded. "He said Emily tends to overreact. And by the time he left, she was already feeling better." Daniel let out a short, humorous laugh. "Feeling better?" He looked toward my parents. "She was unconscious by the time I got there." Their expressions immediately changed. My mother looked back at me. "He told us he was already on a business trip when everything happened." I stared at her in disbelief. "No. He left after I begged him to stay." Neither of my parents spoke. For the first time, they realized Ryan had told two completely different stories. That evening, more relatives began calling. Each person had heard a different version. To one cousin, Ryan claimed food poisoning. To another, he said, "I insisted on staying home." To an aunt, he said, "Doctors kept me overnight only as a precaution." Every story minimized what had actually happened. Every story made me sound unreasonable. Daniel listened quietly as I answered one call after another. Finally, after the last conversation ended, he picked up my phone from the bedside table. "Emily," I looked at him. "Can I see your phone?" Without thinking, I unlocked it and handed it over. He sat beside the window, scrolling through my recent calls. At first, his expression remained neutral. Then, he suddenly stopped. He opened one conversation. His eyes narrowed. He replayed something silently, then looked back at me. His entire face had changed. He slowly lowered the phone and said only 4 words. "This changes everything." Ryan came home 3 days later wearing sunglasses and carrying the same black suitcase he had rolled out of the house while I was lying on the kitchen floor. He expected to walk into a quiet home. Instead, he froze. Daniel was sitting in the living room. My parents were there. My Aunt Linda and Uncle Steve had stopped by after hearing I had finally been discharged from the hospital. The room was silent. Ryan forced an awkward smile. "I wasn't expecting everyone." Daniel didn't stand. "We've been expecting you." Ryan set his suitcase down. "How's Emily feeling?" I stepped slowly into the room from the hallway, still moving carefully because of the surgery. His eyes widened. "Emily." He rushed toward me with his arms open. "Oh my God, baby." I was so worried. I took one step backward. He stopped. "I've been calling you," he said. "No," Daniel replied calmly. "You've been calling since you realized she survived." Ryan's expression hardened for only a split second before he recovered. "I don't know what that means." "It means the hospital called you repeatedly." "My phone barely had service." Daniel nodded as though he believed him. "I see." Ryan looked around the room. "I've already explained everything." My father crossed his arms. "Actually, you've explained several different things." Ryan laughed nervously. "What?" "You told your cousin it was food poisoning. You told us she was already feeling better. You told your aunt you were already away on business. And you told Daniel," my mother said quietly, "that Emily refused your help." Ryan's smile disappeared. "I didn't mean they were different stories." "They're not different. They're the same situation from different perspectives." Daniel leaned forward. "Then let's hear the real perspective." Ryan looked directly at me. "Emily knows what happened." I held his gaze. "Yes, I do." For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. He tried softening his voice. "You scared me that morning." I panicked. I honestly thought it was stomach pain. Daniel reached into his jacket. I've been waiting for you to say that. He placed my phone on the coffee table. Ryan frowned. What's that supposed to prove? Daniel tapped the screen. It proves you just lied. He pressed play. My own trembling voice filled the room. Ryan, please don't go. I can't stand. Everyone listened in complete silence. Then Ryan's voice came through the speaker. Emily, stop exaggerating. A few seconds later, another voice joined the recording. The emergency nurse. Mom, based on your symptoms, you need immediate medical evaluation. This could be appendicitis or another surgical emergency. Please do not delay going to the emergency department. The nurse continued. If someone is with you, they should take you immediately or call emergency services. Nobody in the room moved. Then Ryan's voice answered. She's probably overreacting. She does this. The nurse's tone became firmer. Sir, I'm advising you not to ignore these symptoms. The recording ended. The silence afterward felt heavier than anything that had been said. My mother slowly covered her mouth. Oh my God. My father stared at Ryan in disbelief. You heard that? Ryan swallowed. You heard a medical professional tell you it could be an emergency? I didn't think. No, Daniel interrupted. You chose not to think. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I was under pressure. It was a prepaid trip. I couldn't just cancel everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You chose a vacation over my life. It wasn't like that. Then tell me how it was. Ryan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. My Aunt Linda shook her head. I've known you for 8 years. I never imagined you'd leave your wife after hearing that recording. Ryan looked around desperately. You all are making this sound worse than it was. Before anyone could answer, his phone vibrated loudly on the coffee table. He instinctively grabbed it. Too late. The screen lit up where everyone could see it. Sophia Matthews calling. Ryan's face turned pale. He declined the call immediately. Nobody spoke. Then, almost as if fate had decided he hadn't suffered enough, the phone rang again. The same name. The room remained frozen. Daniel calmly looked at Ryan. So he folded his arms. Who exactly is Sophia? Ryan stared at the glowing screen but didn't answer. The ringing finally stopped. 1 second later, a message notification appeared across the lock screen. Did your wife believe the business trip story? Every pair of eyes in the room shifted from the phone to Ryan. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Ryan grabbed his phone so quickly that it almost slipped from his hand. That's not what it looks like. Daniel gave a short laugh. It never is. Ryan shoved the phone into his pocket. She's a coworker. My father frowned. Coworkers usually don't ask if your wife believed a business trip story. Ryan looked at me. Emily, please. You know, this is being taken out of context. I stared at him. For years, I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I took a slow breath, careful not to strain my healing incision. I'm done doing that. Ryan's shoulders dropped. I made mistakes. Daniel shook his head. No, you made decisions. Ryan looked around the room, realizing nobody was willing to defend him. Without another word, he picked up his suitcase and walked upstairs. The silence he left behind felt strangely peaceful. Over the next few days, Ryan sent dozens of messages. Some apologized, some blamed me, others accused Daniel of turning everyone against him. I answered none of them. Instead, I focused on recovering. Daniel drove me to follow-up appointments, picked up my prescriptions, and helped around the house until I could move comfortably again. One afternoon, while we were sitting in my living room reviewing paperwork from the hospital, I suddenly remembered something. Daniel. He looked up. What? The cameras. What cameras? The security cameras. He frowned. What about them? The morning I got sick. I closed my eyes, replaying the memory. Ryan said the cameras needed a software update. Daniel leaned forward. When? Just before he left. I remember asking why the security monitor was blank. He said they wouldn't work for a few hours. Daniel became very quiet. You never told me that. I didn't think it mattered. It matters now. The next morning, Daniel contacted the security company that managed our home system. After verifying I was the homeowner with Ryan, they agreed to review the account activity. Later that afternoon, the technician called back. There wasn't a system failure. Daniel put the call on speaker. What happened? The technician answered matter-of-factly. The cameras were manually disabled through the mobile app. I felt my stomach tighten. Can you tell when? Yes, he read directly from the account log. The cameras were turned off at 8:17 a.m. I exchanged a glance with Daniel. That was only minutes before Ryan had rolled his suitcase to the front door. The technician continued. They weren't disconnected. They were intentionally placed into privacy mode. Daniel asked another question. Can you tell who did it? The account holder logged in using Mr. Ryan Carter's registered device. The room fell completely silent. After the call ended, Daniel slowly set his phone down. He didn't want anyone seeing what happened. I couldn't argue. For the first time, I stopped telling myself Ryan had simply been selfish. He had thought ahead. He had removed the one thing that could have shown exactly how he walked past me while I begged for help. Daniel wasn't finished. He requested copies of my hospital records with my written permission. The attending surgeon documented that immediate surgery had been necessary because delaying treatment could have resulted in a ruptured appendix and life-threatening complications. The emergency department timeline showed exactly when I arrived, exactly when surgery was ordered, exactly how critical my condition had been. Daniel organized every document into a neat folder. Then he obtained copies of my phone records. They showed multiple unanswered calls to Ryan. They also showed calls from the hospital after I had been admitted. Every one of them went unanswered. Ryan couldn't claim ignorance anymore. The evidence spoke for itself. A week later, another unexpected development arrived. My cousin Melissa called. Emily. Her voice sounded hesitant. I thought you should know something. What is it? I ran into Sophia. I froze. Ryan's mistress. What happened? Melissa sighed. She didn't know. What do you mean? She thought Ryan was already separated. I closed my eyes. So he lied to her too. He told her you two were only staying married until the paperwork was finished. I wasn't even surprised anymore, Melissa continued. When someone told her what really happened about the surgery, she started crying. Crying. She kept saying he told me Emily was perfectly healthy. I leaned back in my chair. Ryan hadn't just deceived me. He had built completely different versions of reality for everyone around him. 3 days later, Sophia ended the relationship. She sent Ryan one final message. Don't ever contact me again. I don't date men who leave their wives to die. When Daniel heard, he simply nodded. One lie always needs another. Ryan's carefully constructed story was collapsing from every direction. His family had heard the recording. The hospital records contradicted his excuses. The phone records destroyed his timeline. The security logs showed deliberate planning. Even the woman he abandoned me for now knew the truth. I looked at Daniel. What happens now? He closed the evidence folder and met my eyes. There's one last person who hasn't heard what really happened. I frowned. Who? Daniel stood, picked up the folder, and walked toward the front door. My employer? He gave a slow shake of his head. No. He looked back at me. Ryan's. Daniel didn't wait. The following morning, he asked me one question before we left the house. Are you absolutely sure you want this to be over? I looked down at the healing scar just below my waist. Only 2 weeks earlier, I had nearly died because my husband chose a weekend away with his mistress, overtaking me to the emergency room. For years, I had protected Ryan's reputation. I had excused his selfishness. I had convinced myself that if I loved him enough, he would eventually love me the same way. The operating room had changed that. Yes, I answered quietly. I'm sure. Daniel nodded. Then let's finish it. Ryan had continued telling anyone who would listen that I had exaggerated the entire situation. He claimed I had suffered a routine appendix surgery and that my family had turned it into a dramatic attack against him. Unfortunately for him, facts don't change because someone repeats a lie often enough. Daniel arranged a meeting with Ryan's employer's Human Resources Department after learning Ryan had falsely claimed he was traveling on company business during the weekend he abandoned me. I attended the meeting with Daniel. Ryan was already there when we arrived. The confidence on his face disappeared the moment he saw the folder Daniel carried. What is this? Ryan demanded. His manager looked at him. Mr. Carter, please have a seat. Ryan glanced nervously between us. I've already explained everything. Daniel calmly placed the folder on the conference table. Then this should match your explanation. He opened it. First came the hospital records. The attending surgeon's report clearly documented that my condition required emergency surgery and that delaying treatment further could have resulted in a ruptured appendix with life-threatening complications. Then came the emergency department timeline. Every minute was documented. Every medical decision was recorded. Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Next came my phone records. Daniel slid them across the table. These are Emily's outgoing calls. He turned another page. And these are the hospital's calls to you. Ryan stared silently. Every call had gone unanswered. Then Daniel pressed a button on his phone. The voicemail filled the conference room. My voice weak, terrified. Ryan, please don't leave. Then the emergency nurse. Sir, these symptoms could indicate appendicitis. She needs immediate medical attention. Finally, Ryan's own voice. She's overreacting. The recording ended. No one spoke. Ryan's manager slowly folded his hands. You heard that medical advice before you left? Ryan swallowed. I didn't think. No. His manager interrupted. You've already said that. He leaned forward. What concerns this company is that you requested leave by claiming you were traveling for work-related reasons while you were actually on a personal trip. Ryan's face lost all color. It wasn't supposed to. It also concerns us. The HR representative added that you've continued using that false explanation after the incident. Daniel quietly placed one final document onto the table. The security company's activity log. The manager read it carefully. Cameras manually disabled. He looked directly at Ryan. Using your registered device. Ryan's shoulders sagged. For the first time since this nightmare had begun. He stopped talking because there was nothing left to say. The weeks that followed changed everything. Ryan's employer completed its internal investigation. His misuse of company travel, repeated dishonesty, and conduct surrounding the incident carried serious professional consequences. He was disciplined, and his reputation within the company never recovered. Outside of work, the damage spread even faster. Relatives who had once believed his stories apologized to me after hearing the voicemail themselves. Several admitted they had questioned why I hadn't defended Ryan. Now they understood. There was nothing left to defend. His parents came to visit me one afternoon. His mother cried before she even sat down. I raised him better than this. I didn't answer. There wasn't anything I could say that would lessen her disappointment. His father simply lowered his head. I'm sorry. Those 2 words meant more than an hour of excuses ever could. A month later, Ryan knocked on my apartment door. I had already moved into a smaller place closer to Daniel. He looked exhausted. His expensive clothes were wrinkled. The confidence he had always carried was gone. Emily. I stepped outside and quietly closed the door behind me. I just want 5 minutes. You've had years. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Yes, I wasn't thinking. I looked at him steadily. No, you were. He blinked. You thought about your trip. You thought about your mistress. You thought about turning off the cameras. You thought about ignoring the nurse. You thought about protecting yourself. I paused. The only person you didn't think about was me. Ryan lowered his eyes. Tears formed. I'll spend the rest of my life making this right. I shook my head gently. You won't spend the rest of your life with me. I handed him the envelope I had been carrying. He looked down. Divorce papers. His hands trembled. Emily, I almost died. My voice remained calm. And the hardest part wasn't the surgery. It was realizing that the person who promised to protect me had already decided I wasn't worth missing a weekend for. I turned and walked back inside. I never looked back. The divorce was finalized several months later. For the first time in years, my home felt peaceful. No one dismissed my feelings. No one made me question my own judgment. Daniel still called every Sunday just to check on me. Sometimes we laughed about childhood memories. Sometimes we said almost nothing at all. But every conversation reminded me of one simple truth. Real love shows up. It doesn't make excuses. I returned to my job at the pediatric therapy clinic stronger than I had ever been. My patients didn't know the story behind the scar hidden beneath my clothes. They only saw someone who listened carefully whenever they said something hurt. Because I never wanted another person to feel invisible the way I once had. Looking back, surviving that surgery saved more than my life. It saved my future. It freed me from a marriage where compassion had slowly been replaced by manipulation, excuses, and indifference. Ryan lost the marriage he had taken for granted. He lost the trust of his family. He lost the respect of people who had once defended him. And he lost the woman who would have forgiven almost anything until the day he left her on a kitchen floor to die. As for me, I never wondered again whether calling my brother instead of the taxi had been the right decision. It was because the man who abandoned me expected to come home to the same obedient wife. But the brother he told me not to bother had already helped me build a life where I never needed him.